All right, so we should be live on YouTube. I'm just going to make sure it confirms over there what's going on YouTube. Remember to share this out if you are seeing this. Help spread the word. All right, yes, we are good to go. Here we are. We're good to go. All right, let's start the recording. Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matthew Belair. As you know, we are currently overcoming extreme censorship. So if you want to support this show, the messages and the teachings, please share these episodes far and wide. Consider leaving a review in iTunes. Become a member at mattbelair.com. But most importantly, consider doing 3 kind acts wherever you are in the world today. Today's guest is a licensed clinical psychologist and the developer of Integral Somatic Psychology, an effective somatic therapy that helps clients achieve optimal mental health by fully embodying their emotions. He is the author of the new book, The Practice of Embodying Emotions, a guide for improving cognitive, emotional, and behavioral outcomes. Welcome to the show, Raja Selvam.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure.
I'm so excited to do this show. I got to look at your bio and your work. That's the shortest, bio for all the amazing things that you've done. So let's just open it up by you sharing a little bit about yourself, your incredible work, your new book, and how you got to doing all the teachings and education you're doing today.
Yeah, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and I teach in many countries, as close to 20 countries, almost on every continent. And my work is based on emotion. You can guess that from the title of the book. And how to promote emotional well-being, and through that, also improve the way people think and the way they behave, regulate both of them. I think it's important to, talk about what is embodying emotion right away. What is the practice of embodying emotion? What is embodying emotion? People understand it in different ways. People think that some people define it as, if I can sense emotion in my body, then that's embodying emotion. Yeah. And I define embodying emotion in a particular way. So it's important to define that to begin with. For me, embodying an emotion is the ability to expand an emotional experience. Let's say we have fear. Let's go to fear. And there's a lot of fear these days, from the pandemic, from the war, etc. And we suffer from it. And often we suffer from it here in the heart area, in heart lung area. Now, sometimes people don't even feel it in the body. They only feel it in the brain. Sometimes people, when I ask people, where do you feel the fear? They'll say, it's in my head, it's in my brain. That's a perfectly okay place to begin, right? But they don't sense it in my body. If they don't sense it in their body, in their face, throat, chest, legs, arms, etc., then for me, it's not embodied. So expanding the emotional experience from the brain to different parts of the body is what I call embodying emotion. The more places I can get a client or get myself, I often use it myself, to the more places I can expand the experience of the emotions, such as fear or grief, to my body too, the more embodied the emotion is. Now, immediately the question arises, why on earth would anyone want to do that? People come to us, therapists, or go to their friends with the following request. I feel fear, please relieve me of this fear, right? This is what they say. They go to a spiritual teacher. I'm afraid of dying, etc. And I don't know where my life is going. I'm losing control. So they expect relief, not a suggestion that they actually expand the emotion in their body as a method to actually dealing with it. So we need to talk about why is that useful. Yeah, why? Let's also set that. Paradoxically, expanding the emotional experience to more places in the body makes it more tolerable. Makes it more tolerable. This is very important. Yeah, the other day I was working with somebody with the fear of dying, She had been burnt as a child, and she was in a hospital, and she had a lot of fear about falling ill. It fixated on this idea that she would fall ill because the burning accident happened so suddenly. So we were trying to expand the fear of illness, right? The fear of that she would get ill. And we expanded it in the body. At some point, she said, it's interesting. I feel more of the emotion, more places in my body. Surprisingly, I find it tolerable. I'm not running away from it. There's a whole science behind it. It's complex, and I can try to explain it later in the show. But essentially, I tell clients the following: if you're trying to lift a 100-kilo bag, will it be easier with one arm or both arms, right? And they say, of course, with both arms. If you also bring your legs to support the weight lifting, would it be easier? They say, of course, it would be easier. Emotion is the same thing. Emotion is the impact, an energetic impact that a situation has on us. The more we can spread it out in the body, the more easy it is to be with, even though we might be feeling more of it. That's the whole idea. Now, how that improves cognitive, emotional and behavioral and physical, energetic, relational, and spiritual outcomes is what we can talk about with examples as we go along. And I personally, I came into it because, I grew up, with the less than an optimal childhood. And there were different traumas. And I not only lost my body, a sense of my body, but also access to emotions. Even if I had emotions, I couldn't share it with them. So I ended up developing all kinds of psychological defenses and physiological defenses like constriction, not to feel them, right? I'm more likely to think about, what do I do with it? How do I get rid of it? How do I solve the problem? What do I do? How do I think differently about it so that I don't have this awful fear of dying, which comes to me very easily because I nearly died in my in my birth along with my mother. So that was a basic imprint. So as I came to the West, I grew up in India and I came to the West and I got interested in psychology. Switched from business to psychology. I have PhDs in both of them. I looked for how to support and bring up emotions on a psychological level, but also I became very interested in how to feel it in the body because I was not feeling it. And I realized that feeling it in the body and expanding it in the body actually made it easier to access as well as tolerate it and stay with it for a longer period of time so that my brain could process it more optimally. It's not coming too quickly with meaning. It's not coming too quickly with the behavior. That it could be an addiction, right? Eating chocolate or whatever. So, and then I became interested in spirituality as well. I became interested in spiritual path of Advaita Vedanta. It's about the path of enlightenment. And to recognizing that you're everything. You're the awareness, that's the basis of the universe in which the universe unfolds. And the basic requirement for that is the ability to tolerate opposites in the limited body we acquire in each life. I went to psychoanalysis, and what I learned from a psychoanalyst is that for relational health, emotional health, cognitive health, and behavioral health, we need to develop greater affect tolerance. That's the term that they use in psychoanalysis. So from the psychological point of view, and from the spiritual point of view, and from a personal point of view, it made sense to pursue this path. And as you know, Matt, you've talked with so many different people, and I'm sure that they will all agree that the work is not done by us. The work is done through us. And it somehow matches our background and our needs, but it's for a larger purpose. So I developed it, taught it in integral somatic psychology. So the practice of embodying emotions is a simple practice that different therapists and different modalities can use, but also people at large can use because it's relatively simple idea, And how do you go about doing it there are many techniques to do that, and I explain different things in the book. So that's what got me into it, that this has become my life's work, and it's really great to put it all down in a book that's in a practical way. It is theoretical in certain sections, but people can easily skip the theoretical section and get to the practical section and use it as they read it. And so that's as much as I can think of right now. I respond to questions. Well, please go ahead, and that's what you do. So go ahead and ask me. So.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that introduction, and I feel like the understanding of how it works is important, and I also like the idea of being practical in what we're going to do. And I feel like your analogy of using the whole body to lift up a weight is a very sound analogy. One of the things that I've come across in interviewing other people is noticing that when people got disease, so often it will be a traumatic memory, and when they thought about that memory, it's actually where it was in the body. And one person gave me this hypothesis that the body was like a hard drive. And when you have, you go out throughout your day, the body's actually storing memories inside the body. But, let's just say it's 1 gig of memory per day or something. Well, if you have a challenging or traumatic memory, it might be like 100 gigs of data right in your heart or right in your lung or right in the pit of your belly. And what it sounds like to me is that you're dispersing that energy rather than like a sword and a pinpoint just stabbing the stomach with a sharp thing. You're using the whole body to transmute the experience so that you still have the memory, but it unlinks this emotional charge. And then that's what happens with the, the neurology in the brain, where you're going to create this like filter of how you view the world, how you make decisions, what you'll set up to protect yourself from that happening again. And so that way you can have the freedom to make the highest quality decision rather than going on a traumatic habitual response.
Exactly. And trauma, especially complex trauma that's relational and repetitive, have very intense emotions. And the body, what it does is that, the brain is geared towards survival. So it does not like unpleasant emotional experiences, especially the intense emotional experience of trauma like grief and disintegration and fear and anxiety and so on. So it does what it does. It tries to repress the emotions by psychological means, but also physiological means. All that you have to do is to constrict the breathing muscles so that you don't feel the emotion of fear intensely. So what we try to do is to go in the opposite direction, educate the client about the importance of, in a simple way to let go of the constriction, the defense against the emotion. For example, there are many other defenses, so that they can expand the fear. So it's not pinpointed in the heart. That can lead to a heart attack. That people can have heart attack when they have tremendous fear, right? And we have cases of that. So I'll give you a simple example, right? We were working I worked in India with tsunami victims after the tsunami in 2004, and in a fishing village. We also worked in Sri Lanka after the civil war with a lot of traumatic emotions. And there's a boy, interestingly, he's a meditator. He was a 10-year-old boy, and he learned mindfulness, but he was having panic attacks, especially when he heard that another tsunami might come. The tsunami had changed the landscape, and so new waves, strange waves are emerging in the village that he lived in, that people interpreted as a sign of another tsunami, and his heart would go into fibrillation, and he would have panic, and he wanted relief from that. So when we worked with him, not for long, what we did was the following. We said, of course, tsunami is, terrifying. It can take your life, and some relatives have died. So when you think that another tsunami might come, you can imagine the panic here, right? So I'd say, where is the panic? Where is the fear? He said, it's here, and it's tight, and I can't breathe. And I said, exactly. So let's do the following. Let's spread the fear, right? Put your hand there, we said, not to make it go away, but because the hands have the ability to do energetically what intention we set it to do. So we say, support it so that it can let go and the emotion of fear can spread. Is it spreading? Yeah. So let us see whether you can make a sound of the fear so that it comes into the face, into the throat, expanded here. And we also had him move his arms. You can also do it through movement to undo the defenses there so that it could also go into the arms. And that's what we did. Sorry. And we said, if you do this, every time you get the fear, it might go to other places in the body. And it might even be bigger. But if you noticed underneath, the body will be calmer. Your heart will not be so pounding. You will not have the irregular heartbeat. Yeah. Because he experiences that during the session itself. And when we went and met him 4 months later and 1 year later, he said that with just that practice, he would never had another panic attack again or panic again. So it can be as simple as that. And that's why I wanted to go out. It's not just for therapists, even though most people who will buy the book are therapists in different modalities. I would like it to go to ordinary people who are looking for educated people who are looking for self-help. And to the extent to which you can facilitate that, that would be great.
Well, that's a really beautiful and powerful story. And I feel like a lot of the techniques that we learn around personal development, or even in the fitness world and sports world and mindset world, success world, whatever you want to kind of put it, whatever category you want to put it in, they don't need to be complicated. It's quite simple. Like, for example, to use a weightlifting analogy, I never lifted a weight in my life because I was a snowboarder and a martial artist, and I didn't really know how to integrate those two at the time. So I did more like body weight movements and things like that. But there came a point where I was like, I want to go to the gym and get a little bit stronger for martial arts. And what I learned about picking up heavy weights, about like deadlifting a lot of weight, and when you think about strength, it's usually deadlifting and squats and sometimes bench press. But the simple technique of 3 sets of 3 every second day, that's all I did. It was not complicated. I didn't need 1,000 different exercises, right? Just that simple protocol. That was it. And when I followed that, I went, and gained extraordinary strength in a very short period of time. And I feel like the same thing when we're looking at mindset and spirituality is these processes, they don't need to be complicated. That we can look at the science behind it and understand that, but even just learning how to stop a repeated pattern, right? A pattern of anxiousness, a pattern of depression, a pattern of fear. And I would suggest to a lot of my clients is just say, just take in 3 deep breaths, learn to notice what your body's telling you, because what most people are doing is they're not paying attention. They don't have that practice. They're living in the mind. And I call it like a task list consciousness. And that task list consciousness is usually linked to fear and anxiety and deadlines, right? You got to get to this place. You got to get this done. And that's one part of life where we need to function in this reality to do that. But if we can do that from a state of peace, because people who are exceptional athletes, right? World-class athletes, in surfing, skateboarding, and snowboarding. Well, when you're in flow riding a big wave, if you mess that up, you can put yourself in serious harm, right? And so that you're not in a state of stress when you're riding the wave. You're in a state of alertness, aliveness, focus. And we can learn how to apply that type of awareness to our everyday living, to whatever we're doing. And we just need a little bit of like a practice, like you said, that doesn't need to be complicated, a little bit of intention with our mind, right? And then to repeat that process. And then the brain and the body starts to develop in a new way, just the same way the muscles react.
Exactly, because then the new way becomes habitual. The new way becomes habitual. But I was thinking about something when you were talking, right? There is research, you might be interested in, you might have seen it already. When people are aware of their body, right? When they're exercising, they spend less energy. This is very interesting. Their fitness improves better when they're aware of their bodily sensations. Yeah. And there's actually a stream of research along those lines, something that I can share with you later. Yeah. And the body's constantly telling us what impact the different things that we're doing, what impact the different situations we are in, are affecting us. So when we become aware of it, right, then we can be more mindful, that we have better meanings about the situations, but also better idea about what to do in the situations. And that's another piece of research, from these are the pieces of research or shoulders that my work stands on. For example, at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, there is a psychology laboratory in the psychology department, where they do a lot of research on the embodiment of emotions. Paula Niedenthal is a lead researcher there. So they give two groups of people different tasks. They both watch the same emotional movie clip. One group is allowed, just watches it. They, of course, monitor the brain. They monitor the body, etc., through wires. In the treatment, in the other group, they say, bite on a pen like that throughout the experience. What that does is that it prevents the muscles of the face from getting involved. In order to involve in the experience, the muscles need the freedom to move. And these people are doing it. And you know what happened? What do you see in the brain while the difference between the two groups? The group that is inhibited from allowing the emotional experience into the face, the brain is not processing the movie or the emotion well. If you ask them after the experiment, they don't remember well. 2 weeks later, they remember less of the emotion and the movie than the group that is allowed to, participate with their facial muscles fully, unconstrained. So that's just the face. You can imagine how the more body you involve, there are other experiments that show that if you prevent the emotion from going into part of the body, you're thinking about it, and what you're going to do in the situation both don't get processed well in the brain, and I think that inhibits our effectiveness mentally and behaviorally. So.
Yeah, that's a really great study to share. And it's so important. And I feel like we're not taught this in school as a young age, how to process our emotions. As a man my age, it was to kind of bottle your emotions, right? That's kind of what they taught the boys, and the girls could express a little bit more, I guess. And now they have a whole new range of teaching, which I'm not sure what's going on there, but I don't think that there's a real embodiment practice. And what that does is I think it stunts our mindset and our emotional growth, and that inhibits our spiritual growth, because we need to be able to open the door to compassion and understanding and truth within ourselves, and open that door for other people. And then that I see it as like anchors. When you have these traumas and you have these perspectives, like a mental Instagram filter, right? So if you have this trauma and you're looking through this filter that sees the world in a certain way that's very limited, when you remove that filter, that weight, you have more options, you have more freedom, and you have more capacity for truth. And that's going to help you evolve spiritually. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that, and then share a little bit about the process. And then maybe we can kind of go into the idea of evolving spiritual, because I think that's really what we want to do. And we need to clear the pathway. We need to let go of all those weights, and then the sky becomes a limit, because there is a lot of challenge we're dealing with in the world, and we need the tools to respond to what's happening in a powerful way that's not going to sink us, so we can make better decisions for ourselves and our families and communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we have time, we might even do a practice ourselves. That'll be fun,
Sure,
so
yeah.
Because we are constantly, roiling, constantly battling emotions in these days of polarization, right? We can demonstrate through our own experience. That'll be fun. At the end, perhaps we can do that.
Sure.
You wanted to, you said a lot, and shall I begin with the steps of the process, or
wherever you like? Yeah, I love the steps, and then we could, because I feel like that's going to open the door to everything else, right? That's just foundational teaching,
right? And we can
and
also talk about the connection to spirituality.
Yeah, and I'll invite too right away with people, because I got the e-copy of the book, and I can see all the chapters. This is foundational knowledge that they are not teaching, right? So it doesn't need to be so complex, and you provide enough of the research, and you have the background with the PhDs to prove why it works. But it doesn't need to be complicated, and this is something that everybody should know how, right? We have basic nutrition in schools, we have basic education, but we don't have basic understanding of how to integrate our emotions and think critically. So I feel like this is just very paramount knowledge for an individual to have.
Yeah. So it's not just people in general don't know it. Most psychotherapists don't know it not because they don't want to know about it, because they're not taught. They're not taught about the body's role in emotion, cognition, or behavior. It's considered to be a phenomenon of the brain. That is the mainstream. But there is increasingly more interest in the body. And that's one of the reasons I think the book is also doing very well. Just 2 or 3 days it has been on the market. It's doing extremely well, and I think that's the reason there's a need there. Now, the in terms of theory, let me say a little bit about theory in a very simple way. The things people don't know. People, for example, I did not know. Why should I say I did not know? Coming from India, doing a PhD in business, teaching at the University of Southern California, and then becoming bored with that and doing a PhD in clinical psychology. I did not know that, because in none of those places I learned that the emotions have anything to do with the body. And it's only when I started to train in body-oriented psychotherapy systems that I started to run into it. And now there's more interest in the mainstream psychological modalities. So essentially, in one of the chapters, for example, chapter, I think 6, or 4 or 5, the physiology of emotions, I use all the findings, old and new, to show that an emotion can be generated and experienced anywhere in the brain or the body. Anywhere in the brain or the body. That's one thing. People don't know that. They think, it has to do with some parts of the brain, like amygdala, etc., or heart or liver, etc. But an emotion like fear, it can be cellular. It's a cellular experience. Candace put it, who's a molecular biologist, and she said it's in every cell. An organism experiences the impact of a situation on every cell. It needs to have the information. So that's one thing. Now, we have known that behavior depends on the body, right? If I have to speak or if I have to do things, I need to involve the body. Now, what people don't know, this is becoming more from the more recent research, is that I had COVID-19 in India about 6 weeks ago. And I still have, I still cough. Interesting. No, even though I've tested negative, I still cough. So excuse me. And the more recent findings in neuroscience and cognitive psychology shows that the body is very important for cognition. Not just the body, but the environment. There are very interesting experiments, how the body is involved in decision making, even in abstract thinking. This is something that people immediately go, no, that's not possible. So I spent a whole chapter there, chapter on cognition, emotion, and behavior to establish that, the body depends on it. And the body forms defenses like constriction, primarily to defend against unpleasant emotional experiences, because nobody wants to feel them. And there are many defenses. Constriction is one of them. And when it does that, then the body, that's important for both thinking and behaving and emotion, becomes inhibited for all these 3 functions. That is why working with the defenses in the body, energetically or physically, to open the body up to embody the emotion, which is expanding the emotional experience, leaves the body open, and it makes it more tolerable, so the brain can process it for a longer period of time. It's not, when the brain is allowed to process the impact for a longer period of time, of course, the thinking will be better and the behavior will be better. So in the second, in a section of the book, there are 4 or 5 chapters, this is all about the science of why expanding the experience of emotion, in the body, by creating more tolerance for the emotion, pleasant and unpleasant. We can also act out with pleasant emotions, right? For example, we go meet somebody and then we fall in love, and we cannot tolerate the intensity of the love we feel. And we might make all kinds of commitments. We make all kinds of meanings, my soulmate, etc., etc. When in fact, it could be a traumatic connection, traumatic bonding. And we rush to commit, etc. But if we can hold that love, the intensity of it back, expand it in the body, we can enjoy it. And our brain has a lot of time to think about it, about what we need to do, etc., and what past situations might this love relate to, this relationship relate to. So we end up making even more functional decisions and relationships when the positive emotions are unbearable. So there are many ways to do that. So the steps are simple. In the last section of the book, I actually give lots of suggestions. And in addition to that, in a few weeks, we will also have on my website a resource section for the book where people can go and see the work, being demonstrated. My working with people, but also I to give them simple exercises for opening up different parts of the body and so on. But let me tell you what the 4 steps are. I call it the situation: emotion, expansion, regulation, and integration. And I'm going to actually demonstrate it too a little later or even sooner. The situation is important. A situation is like, for example, there's a breakup. That's a situation. A relationship ends. That's a situation. In response to which I have an emotion, which is what? It has an impact on me. That's what an emotion is, right? Second step. But of course, I might push it away psychologically, right? Then I work, or I might not share it because I didn't grow up with having support for emotions, like you mentioned, bottle it. So you support the person internally, externally, so that they can have the emotion, they don't deny it, etc. And then in the third step, because emotion, especially very from a very young age, involved automatic and unconscious defenses, like constriction of the breathing muscles, an example, constriction of the throat muscle, facial muscles, and so on, as an example. So we have to, or it could even, the blockages can even happen at the energetic level. But what I mean by energetic level is the quantum level of a being, differences can form. And but if you know how to work with it, then we can expand the emotion and spread it. And then once we spread it, there's greater tolerance to be with it for a longer period of time with all the benefits we have talked about. The 4th step is called integration. When things become difficult, or while we're with the emotion, we need to have a go-to place so that it doesn't overwhelm us, right? Or at the end of a difficult session, we also need to reap the benefits of the work we have done. So I call it integration. So that is simply, I'll give you an example. The woman who felt the fear of dying, that led her to, be afraid of falling ill all the time. When she was able to spread the fear from the chest to the abdomen through my guidance, then she said, I feel the fear, but you know what? My breathing is better at the same time. I'm feeling more fear, my breathing is better, and there's more energy in my legs, whereas earlier it was cold. It's warmer. So those are signs that we can also pay attention to make the experience of emotion more tolerable. Or we can ask at the end of the session, or stop the session and ask them, do you think differently about it now? Do you think differently about what you could have or can do in the situation in the future? So these are the things. Do you feel more connected to the world, other people? Now, an example of yesterday, I did a demonstration in Barcelona a few days ago, and she looked around and said, I feel more connected to people. Whereas earlier, I was so scared when I sat down. Now I'm not as scared. I can experience that they are supporting me. She could feel it energetically, right? So we can look for those benefits in the integration phase. So so I lay it out each step how to facilitate that in yourself and in your clients if you're a therapist. In the final in a section of the book called method or practice. I think it's called practice. So.
Well, that's excellent. And yeah, again, it's very, very simple. It's similar to some of the other things that I've heard before. I can't remember what the title of it was, but it was just the idea of sitting with the emotion, because some people think that you want to stuff it in a corner and never look at it ever again. And that's where all the kind of skeletons of the subconscious, unconscious mind can affect your decision making and your consciousness. So this is a way to kind of transmute that energy. So you have the memory and the experience and the education on what you learn from it, but it's not traumatizing you in a way to create a belief system or something that's going to negatively impact your decision making. So I think that's a powerful and simple way to navigate things. And one question I'd love to ask is, how do you use this process or support people with fear and anxiety? Is it no matter what the emotion is the same process? Because right now it seems like there are many more challenges, there's many more fears, there's many more concerns. And so how can we use what you've learned to just see this world, because it can be challenging, which it is in a lot of different ways, but how do we get out of that fear based into that solution based thinking?
Right. It's independent of the emotion. It's the same method for unpleasant emotions as it is for pleasant emotions. It's the same method for intense emotions of trauma as it for intense emotions of ordinary life situations that are difficult. It is the same thing. And while you were talking, I was thinking about this idea of staying with, on spiritual paths, in mindfulness, etc. We are told, I've been taught, that what you experience, right, with or without awareness. Some of these methods say also notice what's happening in the body, but people say just what you experience and stay with it as long as you can, and it'll transform. Now, this could very well happen. It does. Otherwise, people will not continue to do this, right? But what if they cannot tolerate the emotion that's coming in, right? Just staying with it is not going to do it, especially if the body is blocking it and you're feeling it only in a few places. For example, in your heart, with heart palpitations, you're feeling the fear. By staying with it, it's not going to do. If you just take an extra step to include in the awareness, to use your hands or your awareness to allow for the possibility that the fear could be felt in other places. So you're going against the unconscious defenses. You say, okay, I'll put my hand there. I'm going to stay with it, but I'm going to do more than just stay with it. Look at it, because it's not, it's there. In fact, if you stay at it more and more, if you cannot tolerate it, that area will also disappear from your awareness. Right? That can happen. So you actually go into it, expand it, then you will be able to stay with it much more, and the likelihood of transformation is greater. So it's very exciting, add on. I see the practice of embodying emotions as something you can add on. It's not an independent therapeutic modality, and it's not, in a way, it's not so groundbreaking, to like affect tolerance has been in psychoanalysis for personal growth. In Jungian psychology, the capacity to tolerate opposites as for individuation and growth. In spirituality, Buddhism and Hinduism, enlightenment or Sufism or Kabbalah, the enlightenment, the highest possible achievement of the human being to become aware that we are everything, depends on the ability to tolerate opposite. It has been there. And what we are doing, what I'm doing is saying how to use the body to do that. How to use the body to do that. That's all. That's the extra step. So it can be added to anything. In fact, business decision making, we know that, right? I mean, you're a business coach, and you also conduct, executive development programs, from what I read, right, in corporations. Now, it turns out, we've always known, Antonio Damasio, wrote a book called Looking for Spinoza in, I think, 2006, essentially documenting the fact, that's not the book, one of the earlier books, it's called, I forget the name, Descartes Era. Descartes, who thought that I am what I think. And in that book, Descartes Era, he said there's all the science that tells you when people have emotion, right, they think better, their actions are better, right, in the situation. And lots of research using people with brain damage and so on. And what I'm saying is that if you can add to it, not only to you facilitate people getting to the emotion, and then what? You regulate it. You develop a capacity for it, because we know in the everyday experience, people have emotion, but they cannot regulate it. They do all kinds of things. They create conspiracy theories and act out against each other, right? So having emotion, yes, thinking and behavior are better, but unregulated emotions can actually lead to acting out and dysfunctional, patterns for self and others. So what we're saying is that through the practice of embodying emotions, by adding it to business decisions, or to spiritual practice, or a psychological practice, or a self-help practice, or mindfulness practice, you can actually improve the thinking and the behavior, and the possibility that something can transform. For example, if I'm sitting with a heartache from a breakup, and I don't want to open my heart for fear that this would happen again, or it hurts too much. If I can open my heart, I'll give you an example. A woman came to me in a work training, and she said, my husband fell in love with our secretary. We had a business. And she said, heart is heart. I can't do anything about it. So we separated, we got divorced. I'm in another relationship now. I can't open my heart to this person, even though he's a great guy. And so we started to explore whether there were unresolved feelings, right? And from the betrayal. And there was a lot of hurt there, right? And she was holding it like that with constriction. So by encouraging it to allow it to open up, so that the energy could go to different parts of the body, she felt a lot of hurt. It's like she said, it's like my heart is broken into a million pieces and shards of glass are embedded. That's what it feels like, not just there in my belly. It feels bad. And so we did that work, and she then wrote back to me a little later and said, that session was the price of admission of the workshop, worth the price of the admission of the workshop. I'm so much more open to my current boyfriend. I had no idea I was holding so much there. So what happened? She says, I know I could get hurt with a new guy, but you know what? I know how to work it through, because I've worked through something horrible. I can work it through again, because we cannot guarantee that the heart will not break again. So then it can become a practice when it happens again. So
yeah, I love all that. And I like how you're framing it as a practice and an addition, because anything that's going to help us understand ourselves more, or if it works, then that's great, right? You can kind of use it with other tools that you enjoy or resonate with. And these subtle distinctions, like you said, of opening it up, that might have a greater benefit, right? And I really relate to the physical aspect of it, because like the deadlift or the squat or strongman competitions, if you're picking up a heavy weight, you are trained to activate muscles you wouldn't even think about, right? You think squat is just your legs, but the people who are able to squat 1,000 pounds, they're actually using everything, their arms, their back, and all the subtle muscles. And the more you can engage everything, now the body is working as a cohesive unit. So it would only make sense that this would be the same thing emotionally. And I feel like most people, most adults, and probably myself considered, are children when it comes to processing emotions, right? We're doing it in the most rudimentary caveman type of capacity when the human range of emotions is so vast, and it has depths of beauty and love and compassion and happiness, and just really depths of horror and trauma. And that can really affect us and create a pattern of living that goes throughout our entire life that might not be as aligned to what we wanted to do or how we wanted to operate in the world. And if we had this ability to process these emotions, we could really develop ourselves. And I feel like it probably is the root of a lot of things that are going on in the world now, because there's that old saying that hurt people, right? You have these cycles of trauma, of emotion, of substance abuse, of all these different things, usually because they're not able to process an experience of their life. And so if they can get to the stage of healing and forgiveness and self-care in a real way, in an integrated way where it's not just in the mind, that's so important, because a lot of these problems we're trying to solve in the mind, but the mind is so limited. I don't know how you feel about this being a clinical psychologist, but I always thought like the mind is kind of almost like the little child brain. I call it the dum-dum brain, because it can only process a little bit of information at a time, right? It's got to focus on this conversation. It has to focus on making dinner, right? But then everything gets stored in the subconscious. But the body, I like the idea of the body being the supreme intelligence, like you talked about. Each cell has the mastery of and knowledge of all of the cells. And so that's the invitation of the body. And it's the same way that I understand it through martial arts is, if I go into combat, the body's actually doing it. The body's going to respond before my head can think about what to do. And when I've been in very challenging situations, like a guy with a machete wanted to kill another person, a gun to my head once, in a forest in Guatemala, I wasn't making the decisions. I observed my body respond through words and through action. None of it was my conscious choice. I didn't think I wanted, if I could go back and do a cool Bruce Lee thing, that would be ideal in the fairy tale land. But my body was taking all of the information involved and choosing for me to keep me safe, calculating things that my brain couldn't do. And so I feel like, again, we're putting that intelligence back to our body, and our body to me is linked up to God, creator, the Tao, the universal energy, whatever that case is. And I feel like that's a cooperative energy. That's a supportive energy. And so if we can learn to get back into that, because the mind is like, science is like, how does this tree grow? And we can kind of write it down and we can learn a little bit, but really the mystery of life and all that's around us is so incredible. So to integrate into that, I feel like is very powerful and beneficial. And then it's the mind is like this inquisitive part, because we're always learning and we're always expanding, but there's no end to it. It's just going to be an unfolding mystery as we get to one plateau of understanding. Then that's going to open up an even greater plateau with even more mysteries. And that's kind of what I've experienced through these, whatever you call them, mystical experiences or aha moments. It's like a big realization opened up to, something so much greater. That's like, whoa, now there's even more possibilities. One idea is like, if you're a little kid on a bicycle and you've got your little court to play in because you're very small and your parents don't want you to get hurt. But as a teenager, you can ride your bike everywhere. And now you can go all through these paths and you'd explore town. Now your possibilities really expand, right? And then you become older and then you can travel and you can go around the world to the greatest places that you might want to bike. It's just a kind of a stupid rudimentary example, but just to illustrate how expansive this reality truly is.
Yeah. And I love your example of, if I may, I'll use it when I speak. The weightlifter, the effective weightlifter actually uses every muscle in his body. And the not so effective weightlifters don't know that. They end up getting hurt too, right? The muscles balance each other, I could really feel it. I said, what a great example. What a great example, yeah. And relation to the mind, yeah, the mind is the what we know is that when by having the body more available through developing a more capacity to tolerate difficult emotions, especially, we make the mind more flexible. More alternatives appear, and in terms of how we think about a situation, in terms of meanings, but also different alternatives of what we need to do in the situation, and we can become more flexible. And another thing that struck me is that eating disorder, we all have eating disorders from time to time, right? We use food a lot, and sometimes not so well. Sometimes, it's just the way it is. But some people have serious issues, and anorexia and bulimia and so on. So what often causes such difficulties is in conventional thinking and psychoanalytic thinking is that they're not able to deal with emotional experiences in their lives. And if they can tolerate it, the emotions, like say loneliness, I eat when I'm lonely at home in the evening, not during the day. So if I can feel the loneliness, right, expand the loneliness as opposed to avoiding it, then I might get to a place where I might think, let me call somebody so that I'm not so lonely, as opposed to let me have another piece of cake. Yeah. And I might even understand, and I feel it. Sometimes we don't even feel the loneliness. We only feel the urge to eat. So we just don't eat and sit there and sense how it is. Why are we feeling so bad in the body? Then as we spread the bad feeling, we don't even know what it is. It just feels bad that I want to go and eat. It will flower in the mind as loneliness. The meaning will be accurate. And then we'll say, oh, this is because my husband is away for a week. Those meanings will come. Then let me call him, FaceTime him, or let me call a friend over. So that way we can avoid the addictive behaviors and compulsive behaviors that actually make life difficult for us.
Yeah, that's a really great example. It reminds me of this idea that when you transmute the emotion, you're going to get more information. And right, so at first it's almost like a block where you have this veil up that you can't see. So the addictive subconscious goes right for something that soothes and makes you feel good, right? Whether it's alcohol or food or whatever the case is.
We have the impulse to drink and eat, but
Yeah.
we don't feel what precedes it. Exactly. That's in the unconscious.
Yeah. So when you do that, then now it brings about information. Now with that information, you can make a better decision, right? And you might now have a new option where before it was just the impulsive behavior. It's just one thing, right? Zeros and ones. You're kind of programmed for that behavior. Now you've got another option. And I like the idea of like when you break the pattern of automatic, it's not just it creates an not just one other option, it's infinite other options. So if you've only got, this happens and then that's the response, right? It's one option. But once you break that pattern, it's not just a second option. It's not just call a friend. Maybe it's like, take a bath. Maybe it's go for a walk. All of a sudden that it's infinite. That solution is now an infinite possibility that your body is, connected to, again, a higher
the universe.
whatever the case is, right? And that always has a solution for you. And then that's where your free will comes in too, where you now have the choice, where you go, you know what, even though I know this, I might have the cake. Okay, you're choosing that, right? You're at least more cognizant of that choice. You're like, all right, I'm not, or you might have the cake and the bath or something, you know what I mean? But now it's giving you that choice to break that program.
Exactly. Everything becomes more flexible. And I want to say a couple of things. When I hear you talk, I get excited. A lot of ideas come, and that's a great exchange. And one thing, I'm going to go into another plane, so to speak, into the non-scientific realm, in a spiritual realm. And it's not really non-scientific because science is telling us, right? What science is telling us, neurologists say, you think you have free will, but we don't find evidence for that. things happen. A thought occurs, experiences happen in the body. You then think that you're doing it. In fact, the me, the sense of self, for example, my arm is a bit warm from this sweater that I'm wearing. Who's having that experience? Me. If you were to ask me that, I'll say, me, of course. Tell me where this me is. It's an experience, isn't it? It's an experience. It turns out it's also body experience. And Damasio, the neurologist says, we don't know how, this is a construction. And that makes us believe that there is a me here in the body. Yeah, me in the body. So, and then he says that things happen, then this sense of self, which is just a body experience, takes ownership, right? There are other researchers, neurological researchers, that say anything, even a simple movement of moving the arm, finger, etc. This is the James Libet experiment that has not been refuted. It already happens in the brain. It's already happened. It's an event that has happened. Even when I say, I'm going to move my hand, I'm going to say, when I'm going to think that, I say this at this second. But then you know what? That has already happened in the brain a few seconds ago, nanoseconds ago. So the neurologists don't believe that we have free will. It is just happening. So what's happening in the brain? What's happening in the body? Like you were saying things are just happening. It's not happening here. It's just happening in my body. So where is that coming from? That is coming from the intelligence of the universe. Right? We're just waves in an ocean. And the wave thinks it's moving the ocean, right? Wave thinks it's dancing. No, it's happening. All of it is being controlled by the currents of the ocean, right? So to the extent to which a wave resists it, like by shutting down because it cannot tolerate experiences, it cannot completely disconnect from it. Otherwise, it'll just die, drop off like a branch that falls from a tree. But when it's more open, then there is more information, archetypal, universal intelligence, and not only intelligence, but materials come in too, to solve the problems that we're facing right now. So I was thinking about it when you were talking about how your body does it. You think that your mind is doing it, your body does it. So when you open it, mind works better and the body works better because it's infused with the intelligence of the universe. The more I think that I'm an individual, believing in this sense of self, just as a body sense of self, that is the agent, the more constricted I can get. And that's what spiritual paths say. Spiritual paths say that too. It's nothing really happens through your action. There is no free will. It's good to believe that there is free will, because without the idea of free will, I cannot act in the world. I have to become very identified with this body and sense of self. This is how it works. This is how the universe works, actually, by creating this illusion. So, and I'll end that with, when you develop a greater capacity of emotions, the ability to see this truth increases. And that's one of the reasons why spiritual paths say, develop a capacity for opposites. Great love without acting out, great hate without acting out. Develop a capacity for both. And that's what the practice of embodying emotions can offer people. The other question is, people often ask me, how much emotion? How many places do I have to get into? How difficult should it be for me? These are reasonable questions. It turns out, in the first chapter, the first chapter of the book, after the introduction, I talk about the early development of the work, where the emotions were intense, the embodiment was complete, and for a long period of time. Another question is, how long do I need to feel it? Then I learned in the second chapter of the book, sometimes it's just a little bit of emotion. It's a little bit of expansion for a short period of time. That also brought about dramatic changes. I'll give you an example. A woman who developed asthma after she broke up with a boyfriend a year ago. I couldn't get her to feel sadness. And a little bit of sadness only she could feel. And only here, a little bit here, a little bit there, and a little bit there. That's it. So at the end of the session, I said, what is this going to lead to any change? She surprised me by saying that she went home and cried, and then she hasn't had another asthma attack since. So it is not how much, how long. It's just where you're at. And in these days, because emotions are being pushed away. Even in psychology, for medication and magical tricks to get emotions, reduced, resolved. People are forming these big symptoms, even at very low levels of emotion intensity. So if you do a little bit, you don't know what can change in you. So I just wanted to throw it out there, because when people are thinking about embodiment, they say complete embodiment, deep embodiment for a long period of time. It's not necessary. It depends on where you are, where a client is. And often it is less than more. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I love all that. And you open up a bag of worms when we talk about free will, because I feel like there's so many distinctions. So I kind of want to share a few thoughts and
please. I knew that.
Yeah.
It'll
and
hook
your
you.
feedback. So, I've thought about it before, like, a lot of guests have been on the show, right? And they talk about how their life was one way before a traumatic incident, and then that kind of woke them up, right? Then they started to change things. And so after listening to a lot of different people, I had this idea of what an awakened person is, not a woke person. That's a whole different bag of worms.
I know.
So if you're like awakened, I found that people will take 100% responsibility for everything in their life. So these choices, good or bad, they're going to take responsibility for them so they can learn from them and then respond, right? The other thing is that they go from what can I get to what can I give. So when we think about this free will aspect, it's so deep and so important, because I feel like a lot of people are programmed. And I remember this very powerful story. I was at Burning Man, and it's a very interesting environment. It's crazy. And
I know. I'm envious, because I lived in California for nearly 20 years. I always wanted to go, never made it, and perhaps too old to do that now. But
no, there are people of all ages would have loved to see you there. And, you're very open in the environment because it's such a disorienting environment. It's unlike anything else. There's good and there's also bad there too. It's a very polarity thing, but I experience mostly good. And I feel like that's my experience of it. But I remember talking to this person, and it opened up right away, and it happens, quite often to me, especially there. And he told me about his life. And basically what happened is this guy was in a gang, and he committed a lot of crimes. It sounds like even maybe murders. Like, I don't know. It was really intense. I was just kind of reading between the lines what he was saying. Went into the military, did a bunch of stuff. And he was talking to me, processing all of the stuff that he did. But what it became obvious is that from his upbringing, he was programmed to create this person. And now he's processing that. And what I did is I drew a line in the sand, and I said, look, this is who you are programmed to be. At that point, you were kind of making decisions, but not really. Now that you've had this new piece of awareness, the decisions you make moving forward, you're going to need to take responsibility for, because I think it's our emotions that kind of guide us, where, as a kid, if you steal something or hurt someone and you watch them cry, then you should ideally, if you're functioning, you're going to feel bad. And you're like, you know what? I've made that person feel bad. Now I feel icky. And so now I said, as you make these decisions, right, you got to be responsible for those, right? You can't go in this old pattern and pretend that you didn't know, because sometimes what's that quote, the path to hell is paved with good intentions, or something like that. And so you might have done something that you believed was positive, but then when you learned that it wasn't, now you have to make that new decision. And so I feel like some people, when they move into the AI type of stuff, they're like, there's no free will and you're just a robot. But I feel like the creator has given us free will so that we can respond and learn from our choices. And I feel like you're suggesting it more from this divine intelligence, right? That sometimes the divine intelligence I've witnessed in my life takes over completely and protects me, because I do believe it's a protective force. And then that signal and those impulses are pushing us. If we can learn how to respond to those and be whole in our integration of how we think, how we feel, how we experience, we're going to move towards decisions that make more sense and are in more alignment, because most people, I believe, are programmed to safety and survival, right? The lowest ones, because it's all mental. How do we get the most amount of money, which is basically squirrel nuts? How do we have as much squirrel food, And so what's the highest paying job with the least amount of work that I can then go out in the weekend and do whatever I want to do? And that's how they navigate, rather than who am I? What's most important to me? How do I integrate into all of life? And how can I master myself so I can provide value to my community? And that's where I feel like that idea, the free will, is like you have it. And the people who are, like, I would say, not awake or like kind of asleep, they're making their decisions based on fear and security, and not who they are, but their perceived safety moving forward. Well, I can't make that decision because I'll lose my job and then I won't get the money, or, I'm going to do this job. Like in cars, for example, I saw this where one dealership was very forthright and amazing and awesome, great deals, great cars, great service, right? They were very successful. The other one, their idea was, how did I get the most amount of money per car? To me, that wasn't aligned with a value set. So I couldn't do that, right? And so that person, I felt like, didn't have that same level of authenticity, where in the long run, the person who did the better business, they were much more successful. And so that's kind of, I'd love to hear your 2 cents on that kind of rant and understanding of free will.
Yeah. The free will is essential. The appearance of free will, or the illusion of free will, is essential to navigate the world, right? From a spiritual point of view, there is no free will. However, that the body-mind organism is not free of consequences. The actions and impulses come through this body-mind organism, but it's not free of the consequences. It's a bit unfair. But then one has to look at who one is. At some level, if we go into the subatomic level of existence, there is absolutely no boundary between an individual and the universe. The wave thinks it's only the wave, but can the wave really separate itself from the ocean? It cannot. The entire dynamic of the ocean is there in every wave, right? So our body is, we identify with this body, especially the body that goes into the coffin and the brain in it. And then we identify that sense of self, which is an experience that's generated in it. And then we suffer. But we need the notion of free will. It's hard to get rid of it. And there's no reason to, because we come here to do things, to learn things. And therefore it comes through, and it feels like we are doing it, we are thinking, we are having all these, for example, I'm thinking of all these alternatives and I'm choosing that one. So it's so brilliant, or, oh my God, I should have chosen that one. I feel I'm so stupid. All those things are really based on the idea that one is actually generating those alternatives in the brain or the body and choosing one of the alternatives, right? But it's a complex topic. All that we can say for our purpose is that we do need to believe in it. Most people, have to operate on this plane, and they have to, think and do things and express or not express things, etc. And all that gets much better when one creates a capacity for opposites in this corner of the world, me. Yeah, my body. So.
Well, I love the idea of creating a capacity for opposites. I'm sure we could talk about free will all day because it's such a fascinating discussion. You know, I feel like it's paramount in this existence if it is a spiritual domain. Like my daughter, right? If I force every decision that she has, then she doesn't really have free will because I'm enforcing that. So I feel like the Creator gave us free will. That's my 2 cents, and I understand the scientific implications. But I feel like this seems like a school. You know, Earth seems like a school, and when I go to, you know, the deepest, I don't know, contemplations, and I'd love your 2 cents on this. When we look at about these enlightened masters, so to speak, I've always been curious about that. I went to Nepal to study with monks and did all kinds of crazy meditations and learned from all these different teachers to see what the limits of human potential was. And is enlightenment a real thing? Can I have this different level of consciousness, right? Where I don't know, right? They talk about it in books, and maybe it's this whole other thing rather than this very limited consciousness that I seem to have been given and operate from now. And so I'd be curious your sense on connecting, you know, the path to enlightenment, how to walk through life and connecting with a, you know, the spirit or God, or however you see that from, you know, your work and your point of view.
Yeah. The model I work with, everything is a model, right? Everything's conceptual, is that the universe, the basis of the universe, there's scientific, empirical, philosophical evidence for this, is just pure consciousness, infinite pure awareness. And the universe forms in it, resolves in it, without affecting the underlying substance. The recognition that my awareness, you know, if I were to ask myself the question, who am I? Am I the body, energy, etc.? Am I that sense of self, etc.? It's very quickly I come to, let me make it very clear. Here's the practice. I have a hand that's warm. Who's feeling this warmth? Me. Who's this me? It's an experience in the body. And once, when I look at who's me, my third eye and the crown are going crazy. And because I'm landing in pure awareness, that's making my body its experience as well as the sense of self. That's an experience in the body, right? I'm going to do that right now. My arm, it's heat. Who's feeling it? The sense of self in me, and then immediately, things expand. I'm looking at where is this awareness. I'm now paying attention to my sense of self from my awareness, and this awareness everywhere. That's the basis. This becomes more possible when I have a greater capacity for opposites. That's why the enlightened master said, hey, you want to get enlightened? First, have life experiences that give you the capacity for opposites, and then come to me. That's how I link the two, really. And that's one of the reasons for writing the book, for developing the practice, because I'm on the path of enlightenment, and whether it'll happen in this life or next life, I don't know. But I'm going to do as much as I can. And when I say I'm going to do as much as I can, I say it with a wink, because by grace of the universe, let it happen in this body, mind, organism. It should be the accurate statement, because nothing, comes from me, this sense of self. It just comes, and I take ownership. And I can realize all those things much better if, by God's grace, I have the impulse to develop a greater capacity for emotions that are occurring in this body. That's how I hold the micro and the macro together.
Yeah. And I love that the practice, if people haven't done that, just sit quietly for a few seconds and then think about who was thinking, and then just think about then just kind of go back, like who was having these thoughts, right? Who am I, right? Am I my thoughts? Am I my mind? And it's a very interesting thing, so when you do that, you're left in the realm of just like you said, awareness, or even this contemplation of, I'm not who I think I am, which is just a set of patterns and beliefs and
exactly. And we don't know where they come from. Because if I cannot find myself as other than just the sense of self in my body, where are these thoughts coming from? Where are these feelings coming from? And where is this idea that in order to develop that it's important to develop a capacity for opposites? It's important to use the body. Where are these ideas coming from? I cannot really own any of those. And identifying with it, I can say I'm so grateful that they've come through me and I benefited from it. But it's not really not that way. So going back to the book, so that one can read the first section, right? That gives you all the concepts with plenty of examples. And even from reading just the first section, you will learn how to implement it in your life, whether you're a therapist or not. And you can then go to the third section at the nuts and bolts, step by step. And then if you're curious about the science of it, the best way to learn something, to verify it, is to verify it through your own experience, right? And if you so happen to be interested in the science of it, then you can go to the middle section. There's one thing in the middle section that's very important. Very often when people come, or I have therapists in supervision who tell me, I can't get this client to emotions. And this is also important for people to know. There is an unlimited number of emotions. And because academic psychology tells us only certain things are emotions, like feeling good, feeling bad, happiness, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, that's one list. Or every emotion is a combination of these basic emotions. So, but clients come to us and they say, or friends call us and say, something happened today and I really feel bad. Then we say, we don't think of feeling bad as an emotion. We say, tell me what you felt. We're looking for happiness or sadness. That limits our knowledge of emotions, even though it's staring us in the face. So very often I start with, you feel bad? Where do you feel it in the body? Because all unpleasant emotions have the basic underlying emotion of feeling bad, right? Where do you feel it in the body? Where else do you feel it in the body? Let's just develop a capacity for feeling bad in relation to this relationship. Everything else will clarify itself. Like you said, the thinking about it will clarify. Even, give an example, a woman with very limited capacity of emotions. I just started to work with that she feels bad about what happened. As we did that, then she could come up with more specific emotions like sadness. So people out there, if you listen to the broadcast, don't think about, you can just start with feeling good or feeling bad as an emotion. If you're worried about some situation, worry, that feels bad. Start with feeling bad and expand that. And then through that capacity building, you will actually get to the other emotions, a greater understanding of, the situation, how you can think about it to resolve this emotional difficulty, or what to do about it. That also improves. So I call it sensory motor emotion. Such bodily sensations that make perfect psychological sense. But I wanted to really communicate that to people, who are listening to the podcast, so that they can start to use it right away.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that because it's practical, and then it's easily understandable, right? So then it becomes our decision whether we want to do it. And it's the same with, I find, with the mindset and even with the fitness. A lot of the fitness stuff to get your body in shape or whatever the case is not that complicated. You can have a tool, then it's up to you to practice that tool. Then over time, it's going to become habitual in your natural way of being. So it is going to take a little bit of intention and conscious effort, to see the results of this. So, and with this kind of stuff, the nice thing is the second you try it, you feel it immediately. It's not like you have to think it. You're going to notice the experience immediately. So then that there is a validity to it, that it does indeed work.
And you have emotions all the time. Just read the paper, watch the news. You're going to have emotions. So, and next time you get outraged about something, you have to really get on that. Get on social media and write nasty stuff. sit back, tolerate that emotion, and create, you will have much, you'll have better mental and physical health and much better relationships. I'm talking about people on both ends of the political spectrum, not just one end. So
Yeah, absolutely. This has been beautiful and very practical. And when people check out your book, you're going to see it's laid out in a way where you can understand this, where you can apply it, and you can easily integrate it into your life. Is there anything that you wish that I had asked or that you want to chat about before we close? And do you want to do, we talked about an exercise before, we could do that. But I just wanted to open it up to see if there's anything you wanted to discuss.
I cannot. I've just thoroughly enjoyed it. Where are you in the world, by the way? Which city are you in?
Near Toronto.
Oh, you're near Toronto. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. No, I can't think of anything else. But I think we might actually try. We might try to. Is this live right now, or it is live, right?
Yeah, so, and then people even watching it, YouTube can join us along then.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just go through this process, right, of the practice of embodying emotion, not with something too serious, but if it is serious, why not? So think of, and I will talk about myself, right, and Matt will talk, pick a challenge of his own. So I'm just going to describe the situation, right? Sometimes the situation is not there. People just feel bad. They don't know why. You start on the second step. I feel bad, and then the situation will reveal itself because the cognition will improve and you will know what it has to do with. But right now, I'm going to do the classic 4-step sequence, right? So I find myself, for example, I'm a little breathless. I'm feeling a bit tight here. I'm just noticing my body to see where I am. And, I have many things. The book just came out and I have to do many things that I'm lagging behind, right? For example, I have to pack. I'm leaving at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning and I'm not packed yet. So I have to do the packing. In the middle of it, I'm doing the podcast. So I have this idea that I should have done more. I shouldn't have taken a nap, or, I have all these thoughts, right, about the past that I cannot get rid of. So I'm just going to work with the feeling that I'm not okay where I am, right? That I should have done more, or, I have a perfectionistic critic inside of me. So I'm not okay. My life is not where it should be. I should have done so much more. Let me just work with that discomfort. That's the situation. Yeah. That I've not done enough in my life. Yeah. I should have done more. I'm thinking of these things so that to bring up the emotion, right? So I don't feel good. I don't feel good in my chest. So I'm going to just put my hand there and let that bad feeling, expand. I don't feel good in my, back, middle back where the kidneys are. Just the idea that I've not lived my life, as adequately I should have. I have to somehow make up for it, even though I can't change anything about the past. How does it make me feel? And just feeling it, that it feels bad in my chest and in my kidneys, holding both places, is making me feel better, making my body feel better. I can also notice that, it's not as bad when I feel it in both places. And in order to even expand that, I'm not going to let myself off easy. I'm going to remind myself, I failed to live up to expectations. I should have done much more. I've avoided things, been lazy, all those things that we tell ourselves. And I say that, what happens? The kidney starts to hurt again. I hurt, to feel that way. And the pleasant emotion hurts. And I'm going to actually, in order to expand it to more places in my body, I'm going to express it, in my face or my throat, because very often we push down emotions. Like Matt said earlier, he gave a great image of bottling up, right? Bottle down. The bottleneck is there. So I'm going to go, and you don't have to do it outside. You can even do it internally. It works. Uh, 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 uh. As I think about all the things that I did not do, I should have done on time. Yeah. Yeah. And the fear that I will not do all the things I need to do in the future also, I will have deficits. I can't correct it. And that makes me feel bad. Yeah. How do you live in the moment when you have this psychology, So, even my throat hurts. And as I do that, you know what happens? Energy goes into my legs. And the discomfort is also mildly present in my legs. So discomfort is an emotion, by the way. The discomfort of the situation, the thinking that I'm not up to date, that I will never be up to date. And it's just an impossible, it feels impossible in the body. It feels impossibly difficult. So again, I say, it's very difficult to live like this. And even the bone in my left leg hurts, but I feel it. I'm trying to feel it in as much of the body as possible. And as I said earlier, you don't have to feel it in every place, but I'm used to actually quickly, spreading it out. And so notice what happens in relationship to your issue, where you started to feel it first, and then where you were able to spread it. Sometimes put a hand on one place and put a hand on the other place. By the second law of energy, the energy will connect between the two places, and the emotion will also spread to both places. Yeah, there's tricks like that. Lots of tricks like that we use in the book. You will learn in the section on regulation expansion. So, it's interesting. Somewhere in the middle of it, deep down, my body's beginning to feel okay. That I'm not buying into this. My experience is not buying into this criticism that I failed to live up to expectations, mine and others, that I should have done a lot more, or I should do a lot more in the future to make up for it, or I will never get, feel adequate, etc. Somehow, by just expanding that pain of it, wherever it came from, perfectionistic father or abuse, who knows? But here I am dealing with it, and I'm also, blowing it out. But somewhere in there, I'm actually starting to feel okay about all the things that my mind says that I should have done. I feel okay. That makes me not feel okay. Now I feel okay. And there will be things that I will plan, I will not do in the future. And even that's okay. Deep down, I can feel that I'm okay. And I can also see that this is how it is for everyone, everybody, most people, when I talk to them. So I suffer unnecessarily. I feel okay. Now, I might not feel okay later on, but I know that this issue, if it were to happen again, with you as the witness and Matt as the witness, because we are all, emotions are meant to be processed relationally. And even at great distance, we can actually support each other electromagnetically and more importantly, quantum mechanically. It's called the practice of embodying emotion, the interpersonal resonance, chapter 15 is all on this process, the research that puts it on a scientific basis and how to implement it, even in online work. So this is something that I've been feeling, for a few days, but here I am with Matt, with the support of Matt, doing his own work, and all of you watching it and doing your own work in a limited way. We somehow connect and support each other. And you help me to get there, at least see a glimpse that this is all bullshit, that I'm okay. If I listen to the mind, a critic, it will always be that way, incomplete. But if I go in there and face the emotion that's generating it, get a hold of it, expand it, a space opens up that I feel okay about myself. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And given your support, now that I've touched it, I will be able to enjoy more that the book is doing well, in terms of rankings in different categories on Amazon, right? Whereas I would not be able to, if this thing was in the way. Yeah. So thank you very much for your time, Matt. It has been an honor and such an enjoyable thing, a conversation, because you're so multifaceted. And my work is also quite multifaceted, and hope that we keep in touch and have these interactions. Perhaps we can have a whole episode on free will, research on free will, etc. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I appreciate you walking through that process, because especially in the spirituality mindset world, I feel like processes and tools are very important. And again, all of this stuff from your work and some of the other people I've interviewed, it does seem like this embodiment process, getting in touch with the body, is one of the most effective and powerful ways for dealing with, understanding, and learning from all the emotions that come from being alive, because it's not just supposed to be a happy experience. There are all kinds of emotions of being alive. There's challenges, there's setback, there's loss, there's trauma. And the more that we can learn to integrate the emotional experience of being alive, the more we're going to be able to enjoy our experience and make better decisions for what we want to create here, because we still do have that power as creators to affect our world, to affect our own life and our relationships and families and communities and things like that. So I appreciate you and your work, and for coming on. And for people who want to get the book and learn more about you, where should they go?
They can go to, shall I quickly show where it's on Amazon? It'll be, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to have the link up in the show notes as well.
Give me the share. Give me the permission to share.
Oh, yeah. Give me 1 second here. All panelists, you should have the power.
Let's see. Okay, get to here. Okay, here it is. The Practice of Embodying Emotions, a guide for improving cognitive, emotional, and behavioral outcomes. It's on Amazon, and it's available on Kindle, also on paperback. Very soon, it will also be available as an audiobook. And people ask me, is it out in other languages? So I might as well say, we just sold the rights for Spanish, Russian, and Korean and Chinese. And we are in the process of, getting it published in German, Portuguese, Italian, and French, and so on. So that all these things will take about a year. But right now, it's available in English on Amazon throughout the world, on all Amazon, but also on Google Books and all these, if you Google Books and all these online platforms, I think there are quite a few. So, but Amazon, I know, because I shop there. So, and then you can also look at the endorsements and so all those things you can see. Learn how to build a greater capacity to tolerate emotion, and so on. All the reviews are there. So thank you so much. Let me get out of here. To get out of the. Let me see. How do I get out of? Okay, you can just kick me out. Thanks.
I've never had to do that before. Well, yeah, it looks amazing, and the book just released, so congrats on that. And it does have a lot of practical and powerful tools. So I'm glad you're spreading the word on this, because it's very important knowledge that is not commonplace these days. And so the more of us that can learn it, we can pass this knowledge on with other people. So I appreciate your time and work, and just thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Matt. It has been a pleasure.